So I imagined you were all like, oh, he's coming out. And it was like me, and it was like, oh. I know you're all here to see the man himself, Adriano Zumbo. And I affectionately call all his fans Zumbo Runs. So welcome to the show. You're at the Celeb Chefs Theatre. It's like a masterclass. Before we bring him out, if I could please ask you to turn your phones onto silent, but feel free to tweet away. Are you tweeting? Hashtag Good Food Wine Show, tweet 2015. And then, of course, the exits are to your, should I do it the Kalula way? All right, so on that note, let's bring him out, but we're going to do it on the count of three. And we're going to say Zumbo. All right, 3, 2, 1. Louder, louder. Zumbo, Zumbo, Zumbo.
Hello everyone, how are we? Yeah, good. Yeah, beautiful day today. Nice and chilly, nice and fresh this morning. It was for me anyway. I don't know. I'm probably not used to it. I didn't expect it to be so cold here. Today I'm going to make a zumbaron or a macaron. And I'm giving it a little bit of a South African inspiration. And I'm going to do the Milk Tart. I think I've been practicing this morning. I didn't say it that well yesterday. So to get started, I'm going to get straight into it. I'm going to make the shells first. So I'm going to make an Italian meringue based macaron shell. There's many ways to make a macaron shell. French meringue, Swiss meringue, and they're all quite different in the way that you make them and the end result. I prefer Italian meringue because it's a lot more consistent. You use the hot sugar to stabilize the egg whites. And I also use Swiss meringue a lot at work, which is another way of heating the egg whites and sugar over bain-marie 65 and then whipping it till it's cool. And that also gives a good stable meringue. I find French meringue is it works well as well, but it's always the hardest one because it's you rely very, very solely on your skill to whip meringue because a couple of seconds too much, a couple of seconds too less, yeah, your macarons don't work. So to get started, I'm going to put the sugar and water. Egg whites. Into the saucepan. So I always put the water in first. Whenever I make sugar syrup, I always like to put the water in first so it creates a barrier with the bottom of the saucepan. So there's water in there now. So when I add the sugar, as sugar's hygroscopic, that water is going to absorb. The water's going to absorb the sugar. Sorry, straight away. So if you can see, it starts to suck it all up. And if I was to leave that, eventually, probably in half an hour, without even doing anything, it would just dissolve. So rather than putting the sugar in first and then the water on top, which the sugar's touching the surface of the pot, and then I pour the water in, the water then absorbs into only one area of the sugar where you pour it. Or even if you pour it all over it, it still only absorbs on the top surface. And it takes a very long time to soak all the way through. So this way we avoid trying to caramelize the sugar if I don't stir it. So I don't want to stir the sugar because I don't like to stir the sugar for macarons or for caramel or anything like that. I always like to put it in like this, let it go. Stirring the sugar a lot of the time can crystallize the sugar. And I like to just avoid that. I always try and make a precaution to not have to get into that situation. So I'm just going to put that on the heat. And I'm going to cook this water and sugar up to 118 degrees. So I'm just going to use a thermometer. I'm just going to use a digital thermometer. You can use any type of thermometer, but I recommend everybody who likes to make pastry to buy a digital thermometer. It doesn't have to be like this. It can be just like a little stick one that you hold. Pastry is quite key with temperature. Temperature, whether it's a ganache or a custard or anything, and temperature is really key. I always recommend it's a very handy tool to make great pastry. Okay, so I've got 2 lots of egg whites. 1 lot of egg white I'm just going to pop into the mixer. So I'm just using an electric mixer with a whisk attachment. And the other lot of egg whites I'm going to put into the TPT after I blitz it up. So TPT means tant pour tant, which means half and half in French. Is pretty much consists of almond, half almond and half icing sugar. Always remember to use pure icing sugar. Don't use icing mixture. I'm not too sure how it works here. But in Australia, we have icing mixture and icing sugar, pure icing sugar. And the icing mixture has corn flour in it. So it has a bit of starch inside it. And I prefer not to use the one with the starch because sometimes the one with the starch is the cause of a lot of cracking in the macarons. So always check the packet whenever you buy that icing sugar. Today I'm using almond meal, which is the other half. But I prefer, at work, I use whole blanched almonds. So I use the whole nut. It's been blanched. So I find that retains a lot more natural oil. That way we get a better moisture content inside the shell of the end product for the macaron. So even though I'm using almond meal and it's already a powder, I'm going to re-blitz it, because I want a finer powder to get a nicer shell. That's too coarse to make great macarons. You're always going to have a grainy sort of shell on the outside. So just pop it into a food processor. And it's going to blitz that up to a fine powder. Just be careful when you're blitzing it up. Don't over blitz it, because what happens is this will warm up the mixer, and the rotation speed will warm up the almonds and start to separate the natural oil out of the almonds. And you can easily make it into a paste. So. Okay, so just take that off the blitzer, and then you can see we have a much finer powder. If I was to, and it's all mixed, it's mixed nicely. I don't need to sieve it. I've got a really fine powder, and I can use that straight away. If you use whole almonds, it's best to rest it for a day or two. Make it a day ahead. Just lets a little bit of that natural oil moisture sort of dry out a little bit, so it's not too pasty. Sometimes it can be a little bit thick from the mixing. So just keep an eye on your sugar. Make sure when you're checking the temperature, you always move the thermometer. Never leave the thermometer in one place, because when a pot heats up, it heats up differently in all different places. So the outside gets hotter than the inside. So you really need to make sure that you move it around so that you get an even and an accurate temperature. Because if I was to leave it just there, you can see the temperature always changes quite dramatically sometimes. You know what I mean? So if I move it around, it always drops a little bit or goes up depending on where the heat and it's a little bit colder. Okay, now that it's on about 110, between 100 and 110, I always like to turn the egg whites on. Okay, so now it's at 115. So if I was to use watercolouring, I'm not going to colour this today, but if I was to use a watercolouring, I'd add the colour into the sugar now. So it gives me a few degrees to evaporate off that excess water, which I don't want to put into the macaron mixture if I was going to use a water-based colour. If I use a powder colour or a gel-based colour, I just add it straight into this part here, into the TPT, the paste I'm going to make in a minute. So that's at 118 degrees now. So I'm just going to take it off the heat. If you overcook this sugar syrup, if it goes 120, 125, don't throw it away, You can just add a little bit of water and recook it. It'll come down. So what happens when we add water and sugar together, we cook it, the water just evaporates. The sugar gets densifies to get the right consistency and the right heat that we need, and then we pour it in. But if you go over, just add a little bit more water. It takes it back to where you were, and you recook it back. So I just want the eggs to come up a little bit, so they get a little bit frothy, and then I'm just going to run the sugar down the side of the bowl. Make sure when you pour the sugar in, it goes down the side of the bowl. Touches the bowl and runs down the inside of the bowl. That way it doesn't hit the whisk and flick sugar all around the bowl. So I poured a little bit into the whisk and I missed. But yeah, try not to. Because all that sugar that doesn't go into the meringue is less strength in your meringue. Because the hot sugar is what strengthens the meringue. Gives it the stability, cooks it, semi-cooks it, and gives you that nice firm texture you want when you add it into the TPT. So while that's mixing, I'm just going to add the second lot of egg whites into the TPT. And I'm just going to make that into a paste.
If anyone has a question for Adriano, please put up your hand. Now's the chance.
Yeah, ask me anything. Anything you want to know, I'm happy to tell you.
Yeah, question, gents? I'll put you on the spot now. It's good to see a lot of gents here. Usually the crowd is just filled with ladies. Yesterday there was just ladies. So it's good to see a balance. All right, we've got a question up there.
I think you're missing some egg whites. Doesn't look like enough egg whites. Doesn't look like there's enough egg whites. There's not enough egg whites. Yeah, it didn't look like enough in the jar. Do you want to grab me some more? Sorry.
I make my macarons exactly the same way as you do, except for one thing, is that I actually sieve the things about 3 times.
Yeah, I don't sieve it.
Because if I don't sieve it, then I find that they don't rise enough.
If you don't sieve them, they don't rise enough.
Yeah, if I don't sieve the icing sugar and the almonds enough, if I leave them sort of, if the almonds are a little bit sort of, maybe not as you buy them in a packet in the shop, the meal, I find that the macarons don't come out properly.
Okay.
So
That's interesting.
even though I put them in the Maggi mix first, I still sieve 3 times.
You put them in in this and then sieve them 3 times.
And then I sieve
Wow.
them 3 times. And it's such an effort.
Yeah, it's too much. Yeah, I don't sieve any. I never have.
I can see that. Okay.
Ever.
So I'm going to
I only sieve them before. I only sieve them if I don't have one of these.
One of those.
Yeah.
But
If I have
maybe
this, I don't sieve it.
Maybe that's much better than my old Maggi mix. You see, that's probably why.
What was that? Sorry.
I said that's probably much better than my old Maggi mix. That's probably why.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty good. This works pretty well. Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect point to sort of plug our sponsors, which is Taurus and Kenwood. So, time to replace. All right, next question. While I'm on this side, anyone on this side? Okay, here we go. I'll come to you, gents, over there.
Hi, can you please tell us what was the consistency of the egg whites before you poured in the syrup?
So yeah, I just whipped them pretty much roughly halfway. So just starting to come foamy. Yeah, and then I pour the syrup in. So I don't want to whip them too much because they start drying out, and I don't want to under whip them, because then you don't. Sometimes you don't get the volume. So about halfway, I usually like to start the process and then pour it in while it's starting to aerate. So you want to get a nice firm meringue. Thanks. So I'm just going to add a bit more egg whites because I don't think there was enough in the way up. Because I can see that the paste is a little bit dry.
Adriano, we've got another question over here.
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, Adriano. I'm super
Hey, Gon. How are
excited
you?
to hear. Like, sorry, it's a moment.
No, it's good. Love it.
Do you prefer gel colouring or the powders? Do you have a preference?
I used to use gel colouring, but I guess now at work we make quite a lot, so the gel colouring became hard to use because we just go through bottles and bottles. So now we use powder, but I'm a big fan of powder or gel. I think they're both very concentrated. They both work really well. We use powder and we mix it equal amounts of water to powder, so 50%. So 1 gram of powder, 1 gram of water make it into a paste, and then we add it into this mixture here. Yeah. So same with the gel colour, add it into this because there's not much water in it, so there's no need to evaporate it off. It doesn't change the consistency of the batter.
Adriano,
Yeah.
besides the Milk Tart or Milk Tart, have you tasted any other local flavours? Are there any flavours you'll perhaps be taking back with you? Have you had Mulva pudding? Have you had Cook Sisters?
I haven't. I know of them, but I haven't had them yet. So hopefully, I've got a day off tomorrow, my last day before I head home tomorrow night, and hopefully I'll spend the day tasting a few of those things. Yeah.
And I can guarantee you all the ladies in the audience is like, I'm free tomorrow. All right, next question.
Hi, Adriana. I just want to know, in your book, you use a lot of egg white powder, which we can get here, but it's not so readily available. What is the purpose? Or
The egg white powder is
what
just to add a little bit of extra protein to the mixture to give a little bit more stability. You don't have to use it. It's mainly, we use it mainly in big batches, when we're using a big volume to give us a little bit more strength. Because the bigger the volume, sometimes you lose a little bit of stability because of the mass. So we add egg white powder because it's just pretty much dehydrated egg whites. So egg whites are 90% water, and 10% protein. So you're just taking all it is the protein out of the egg whites, and we just add that in. So you don't have to use it, definitely. But with your egg whites, especially with these ones, it's best to use aged egg whites. For the ones that you whip, I always like to use egg whites that are like 3 days to at least a week old. Yeah, I put them out on the bench, leave them out in your kitchen bench for 3 to 5 days, and let them age. Start to break down, start to get nice and watery, and they start to build a little bit of acidity. And the acidity helps you when they whip to get more strength. Yeah, and that's another way of eliminating egg white powder as well. But anything over a week, after you age them for a week, I'd put them back in the fridge just to keep them. Depending on, I'm sure it gets quite warm here in the summer and all that sort of stuff. So don't leave them out for too long because they'll actually just go off. Yeah. So put them back in the fridge after you get that. After they get quite watery, that's all you want to get them to, nice and broken down.
Okay, Tasneem, you've got a question.
Hi, Adriano.
Hey, how you going?
Hi. I'd like to know from the 3 methods of making the macarons, which is the best? Because I use the French meringue. I age my egg whites as well.
Yeah.
But I saw on TV one of the UK chefs, James Martin, when he makes his pavlova, he actually heats his sugar in the oven. And he puts that sugar directly into the egg white, and it works. So that's a fast way of making the macarons. But which do you recommend is the best? Because I use the French at the moment.
French is good, but if you've got the skill, it's great. You know what I mean? It works. It's lower in sugar as well. You get less sweetness through the shell, but it is the hardest I find because the meringue is at its most unstable, because there's nothing helping you to stabilize it. So if you don't know much about meringue and the way meringue sort of, to know when it's actually, I think that's the key I see with a lot of people when they stuff up, is just that knowing when the meringue's right and wrong. If it's over whipped and it starts to look curdled, it's dry. Like, throw it in the bin. Don't even bother. Do you know what I mean? And that's why I see a lot of chefs teaching people to whip meringue on high speed. But the faster you whip it, the quicker it's going to break down. You don't have time to build the strength in the meringue. Work those let that thing get strength. I always teach everyone at work no more than medium speed for any type of meringue. Dacquoise, meringues, macarons, whatever it is. And I always do a test for them. I'll whip one machine on full speed, and I'll whip another machine on medium speed, and I'll show them the difference. You can see the difference in the meringue. So if you've got 2 mixers, if I had 2 mixers, I'd do the test now for you, but I don't. But you'll see the difference in the 2 meringues and the way that they react. So I always prefer, we use Italian meringue for the more sweeter sort of, we use Italian meringue for the more bitter, more acidic sort of flavors that work, and then we use Swiss meringue for all the fruit flavors. A lot of the sweeter fruit flavors, because it has a lot less sugar than the Italian meringue, and I can control I guess macarons, it's all about controlling the sweetness, it's easy to make a macaron and make it super, super sweet, but then you lose all the taste. You know, all the flavor goes out the door. Sugar just masks flavor. It's a coating for flavor. So any flavor you put into it, the more sugar it has, the harder you got to work to get the flavor right. So reducing the sugar content is always our goal when we create. So it's just trying to match what suits what shell best.
Adriana, I'm all the way on top here. This is a really good view, actually. I can see why the ladies are all drinking the Adriano Kool-Aid. All right, we've got a question up here.
Hi, Adriana. How
Hello.
are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good, thanks. I recently traveled to Australia and got to taste your Tim Tams.
Oh, yeah?
Loved them. I
Yeah.
just wanted to find out if they are going to be coming to South Africa at any stage.
Oh, I'm not too sure. I'd have to ask when I go back. I do...
At Spa?
Oh,
Really?
you can get them here.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
The Zumbo ones?
They're
Or just
really
normal Tim
amazing.
Tams? Normal Tim Tams, yeah.
Thank
I'll
you
ask.
so much.
Yeah, I'll ask when I go back. I could definitely. They haven't sent the Zumbo Tim Tams anywhere other than Australia yet. Like we've just been. Hopefully they go. Hopefully they eventually send them around the world because there's been a lot of interest everywhere I kind of go. So we'll see. I'll definitely put that up to Arnott's when I go there next for the next meeting. So I'll just get back to this quickly. So I've just folded through the meringue, and so you start to see I've got a batter that falls off the beater. So it's still quite thick, yeah. Like it's not like water or anything. It still holds, and that's key to the meringue. So building a good meringue is always key to giving that stability to the macaron mixture. If you don't build a good meringue, then that will be like pretty much like soup, yeah. And it's all about the texture is batter before you pipe it to get a nice meringue. So I'm happy with that texture. But a lot of the time you might have a little bit more air in it, yeah? So it might be a little bit more firm in the batter, and you need to deflate the mixture by getting a spatula and hitting it against the side of the bowl to make the mixture less air and more dense. The way it works, I guess, when there's more air in it, obviously there's less shine. And you'll see when people say to me, oh, my macarons aren't shiny, and I pretty much most of the time I tell you because you've got too much air in it. It's more surface area. There's more area for the sugar to have to coat, and the denser you make it, the denser those sugars are, and the shinier you'll get, because it's pretty much the shine is from the content of the sugar. Yeah. Hi, off, man. See you later.
Thanks, South Africa.
Have a safe trip. Brent's off. Rightio. Okay, so just grab a piping bag. Put it in a tube. I like to use a number 7 or 9 tube. Nothing too big, you know what I mean? Otherwise, too much mixture comes out, and it's very hard to pipe. So just cut the tip off it. I always like to twist the bag and then push the bag inside the tube just to create like a plug. So obviously the mixture is quite liquidy, so it doesn't run out the bottom. So a key thing when you're filling a piping bag is not to look at the size of the bag and think, I've got this bag this big, I'm going to fill it right up. You know, because the worst thing I see people do is fill a bag with all the mixture that they have, and I watch them struggle to hold it. You know, I do a lot of cooking classes back home, and I turn my back for 2 seconds, and there's always 1 or 2 tables that will fill the bag up to here. And they're always the smallest people in the class, and they sit there with this bag and they're like holding it, and I'm watching them, and she's like squeezing so hard, or it's always key. You don't need to fill the bag up. The bag's refillable. So I always say roughly about a quarter is a good amount. That way you're in control, especially when you don't have a lot of piping experience. The more experience you get, then you can try tackling a little bit more. You know, probably when I do it, I fill it up halfway. But I always say a quarter is always a great sort of level to judge yourself on. So twist the bag, yeah, get the excess out of the tip, any air bubbles or anything like that. So another key thing when piping is the pressure in the bag. So if I undo the bag again, See, there's nothing in the bag, the pressure. So if I was to have to pipe that, I'd have to squeeze, yeah? So I have to squeeze with my strength to get that out. So to use that strength, you have to use, obviously, your brain to tell yourself to pipe. So it's another using that focus that you should be focusing on, watching the size and the macarons to pipe the bag. So I like to put pressure in the bag. So tightening the bag nice and tight, and the bag pipes itself. You know what I mean? So if I've always got pressure in the bag, I press ever so gently to get stuff out. So I can think more about what I'm piping. I'm not thinking about how hard I've got to squeeze the bag because there's not coming out. You know what I mean? I think that's key when you pipe, because you've got to think that when you think about everything else, it takes your direction away from what you should be doing. So tighten the bag. Another key thing is when you pipe, it's very easy. It's a one direction sort of thing. You put it bag straight up, hold it in one place, pipe, push, 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 stop, let go, and clean it off. Yeah, it's very simple. The majority of people I see come through, they start piping like this to try and pipe because they think it's a circle. You got to pipe it in a circle. Piping's a lot easier than that. One place, push. Oh, something. I got a lump.
Minutes.
Push, stop, push, stop, push, stop. And then start the next row in between the first row. And stop, give the bag a bit more tighten because I know I'm starting to have to push too hard. Stop, push. Always keep them well spaced, yeah, nice and evenly. There you go. Okay, so once I've finished piping, you can see that they sort of nearly fall into the right position. You know, they've got a nice shine to them. You know, they're not massively domed over like little mountains, which they shouldn't be. You know, and I always like to give them a little tap on the edge just to make sure I get any excess air out that there is. And the thicker the mix, the more you have to tap it. But I know the mixture is quite good. It's not too thick. I'm gonna put the nutmeg. Got the nutmeg and the cinnamon and the sieve. I'm going to dust them in nutmeg, but I can't find it. So when they come back with it, I'll dust it. While I'm waiting, I'm going to make the ganache. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a milk tart puree. So I just break up bits of milk tart and turn into a puree. I always find the best way to get the right flavour when you're trying to copy a already product is to use the product. You know, when I make pancake macarons, I make pancakes. I put them in there with maple syrup, you know, and a little bit of milk, and I blitz it up into a paste, and you get the same taste that you do when you eat pancakes. Obviously, it doesn't look as good, but thanks. So now I'm just going to get the ganache going. So I've just got cream. got the Milk Tart puree. Thanks. And I'm just going to put that on the heat, and I'm going to heat that up to 65 degrees. So the reason why I'm going to heat that to 65 degrees is because I want my ganache to set quite quickly. So I'm just showing you the way to make your ganache set quicker. Obviously, it won't set in time for what I'm going to do. I've got one already made, but the way I do this ganache is the ganache will be able to set within an hour to 2 hours and ready to use, set completely firm without putting it in the fridge at room temperature. So I think it's key to always scrape that in the bowl. Thanks. The key is, what was I talking about? 65 degrees. Yeah, getting it set at room temperature. Sorry, had a mind blank for a moment. The key is what I find is when you're doing ganaches or fillings for macarons is to keep them at room temperature. That way they're always at the right temperature you need to use to pipe it, yeah? Putting a ganache in a fridge will make it go rock hard. Yeah, and then you've got to take it out, wait till it cools down, or you start heating it up over a stove or a microwave, trying to get it back to the consistency that you want, and it turns into a big dilemma, a headache, and a lot of the time you lose a lot of product. Sometimes it splits, sometimes wastes a lot of time. So the way why I heat it up to 65, two reasons. One is I don't want to boil cream. Whenever I make ganache, I never boil cream. When you boil cream, you should never boil cream. That's what I believe in. It's not what everyone believes in, but you start evaporating off liquid, yeah, because the majority of the cream's water. So as soon as you start boiling something, it's evaporating. So once you start that process, you evaporate off and change the consistency of the recipe. So always, even if I'm not doing a ganache or whatever, I'll heat it only up to 90 degrees. Any time that I use cream or milk or whatever it is, I'll never boil it. In this case, I am. Is that empty? I just take it out. Yeah. So I'm using this temperature of 60 to 65 degrees to activate the cocoa butter in the chocolate. The majority of chocolate, it's cocoa butter based, yeah? So I want to drop this temperature of this ganache when it comes out. I want it to be between 30 and 35 degrees, roughly, you know what I mean? That's the temperature that cocoa butter pretty much crystallizes at, around 30, 35 degrees. So I'll just finish these off as I left them before. So just sprinkle some mixture of nutmeg and cinnamon on top of the shells. And then I'm just going to leave them there to dry, get a skin. So I want those macaron shells to get a skin and go touch dry, yeah? So when I pipe them, when I touch them, obviously the macaron mixture would stick to my finger and be sticky. So I wanted to leave it until I touch it and it doesn't stick to my finger. Yeah, so that's when I know they're ready to bake.
Adriano, we've got a question from the audience.
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, Adriano.
Hey, how you going?
Huge fan. I was at your store actually 2 weeks ago.
Oh, really?
So
Yeah, nice.
You come up with the most amazing flavors. Now, what's the thought process in creating a salted butter popcorn or a toasted marshmallow or something like that? And then do any not work? Like,
what was that, sorry?
Do any not work? Like some of the flavors you try? Because some
Not
of them
work?
are really
Oh,
out
yeah,
there.
some don't work, yeah, definitely. a lot of those ones, we usually try and work on it till we get it right. Some might get quite quickly, some you might take a lot longer. But things like those flavors that you just mentioned, a lot of it's nostalgia. You know what I mean? Like being a kid, eating popcorn at the movies. Like why not make it into a macaron? It's things like that. That's where I sort of get inspiration for those sort of things from. Toasted marshmallows. I used to be in Scouts when I was a kid. You know what I mean? And all the little memories I had, and having the skill and being in the industry and always trying to come up with something different. You sort of just kind of you always when you're thinking, you're going through all the different things, or when you travel, you meet new people, see new things. Supermarkets for me, a lot of inspiration. Going through the aisles, looking at things. What can I use? So various things like that are always quite key into coming up with new flavors. So I'm just bringing this up to. I need that. I need that for the ganache. Yeah. That's all right. I'm just putting the same back in it.
Adriano, 5 minutes. I'm going to take you back to the MasterChef style where the clock goes.
5 minutes?
5 minutes.
Yeah, no worries. All good. Righto, so I'm just going to put the chocolate in the food processor. And I'm just going to blitz that into smaller pieces. That's all right. It won't go anywhere. It's got suction cups on it.
The lady in the audience with the magic mixer, can your machine do that?
Hey? It dances for you.
It dances as well, not just mixers. See, Taurus, good products.
Okay, so I just want to blitz the chocolate into smaller pieces so that when I add the cream and milk tart mixture to it, it's going to be a lot easier to melt, bring it into a smooth ganache. I'm making the ganache in a food processor. It's my favorite way of making ganache at work. We got a big food processor. We make it always in there. It's a lot easier using the blade. It helps you chop the chocolate. And like I said before, with the temperature control, you're going to see I get a nice, smooth, shiny ganache. It's always, not many air bubbles. It's always quite consistent, and it's a lot easier. You know what I mean? Than rather than pouring it over chocolate, letting it sit. Sometimes it doesn't all melt. Sometimes you got the hand blender out. So like I always try and look at ways of doing things a lot easier. So just pour the. It's the one on this side, over here, the third one. Yeah, that one. Just pour it in. Turn it on, bring it together, and you'll see when all the chocolate's disappeared, it's ready to roll. Sometimes you might need to mix it a bit longer than other times. Just make sure the chocolate, depends how much you blitz the chocolate up. But don't take it out until you can't see any bits of chocolate. Where are those dishes at? So while that's mixing a little bit, I'm just going to prepare another piping bag for the filling to fill my macarons. So you can start to see that it's nearly there. I pretty much touch it, doesn't stick to my finger, but it doesn't have a thick enough skin yet. I can just tell. Beautiful. So you can see that you get a nice shiny. You see the ganache is quite thick already, and if you were to come back in a couple of hours, you'd see it would be set. You know what I mean? Completely without any fridge. One second, I'll scrape that out. Yeah, just want to scrape that out. Thanks. Okay, so just leave that at room temperature in a nice room, in your kitchen bench or whatever, somewhere nice and not too hot, yeah? So same thing, I just plug the end of the piping bag. Okay, once again, don't put too much in the bag, especially with the filling, because filling can sometimes be a lot thicker. So with those macaron shells, depending on the oven, it's depending, I guess, on how long you cook them or on the temperature as well. Everyone's oven's quite different. I mean, we have various ovens at work or at home. Or if I cook them at home, I cook them at a lot different temperature than I would at work. It's usually between 130 and 170 degrees, depending on your oven. That's why I always say you've got to know your oven and know your appliances. If you don't know your appliances, then you're never going to have a lot of success cooking, because you have to understand how it works. You have to be in touch with your appliances and know exactly what they do. You know, that corner's a little bit hotter. This bottom shelf's going to, it's going to burn. So you should take note when you cook. It's all trial and error. So on average, I say 150 to 160 on most ovens, but it just depends. You just make sure you try it first. I always like, if I'm using a new oven, to put a few, put pipe 3 or 4 in a separate tray and just put that in. So you just test it first, let them stuff up 3 or 4 rather than stuff up the whole batch. It's always a good thing to do. So now coming to the filling. So after they come out, just make sure you flip them and just match the sizes as best as you can. And then we're just going to fill them with the filling. Always make sure you're very generous with the filling, yeah? The filling is the only place most of the flavour comes from. And there's too many places that give you a stingy filling. It's all about, it's like the filling should be the same size as the shell. It should go shell, filling, shell, and they should be all equal sizes. Not a little dot in the middle like this just to stick it together. Do you know what I mean? Because then you're just pretty much eating biscuit. It's not a macaron. It's just like 2 biscuits stuck together with a little bit of thing, like a little bit of ganache or jam or whatever you put in it. The whole purpose of the macaron is the filling. After we fill them, that we age them for 2 days in the fridge before we eat them. Yeah, and we put them in the fridge for 2 reasons: that the moisture from the filling absorbs in the inner part of the shell, and the moisture from the cool room will absorb into the shell as well. Sort of like an osmosis effect. Yeah, so I mean, if they're not filled properly at work, I make them throw them in a bucket. You know what I mean? I won't let them sell it. Like it's very key.
Adriana, ideally, how long should they set for before it's ready to eat?
Yeah, 24 to 48 hours, depending on the flavour. You just got to do a check. We pull them out every day and just check them.
And yesterday you mentioned it lasts up to 4 months. Is that true?
Yeah, up to 4 months in the freezer. Yeah, once they're filled, you can store them in the freezer now, and they last up to 4 months.
Up to 4 months, but I imagine, as at my home, it never lasts longer than the time you buy it, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, cool. All good, done.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. So I know everybody's going to want to sample, but as Adriano said, that it takes 24 to 48 hours. So there's a slight disclaimer, right, Adriano?
Yeah, I mean, they're hard as a rock.
They're hard as a rock, but I'm sure that's either way, you're still going to try it, right? Yeah, there we go. Everyone's shaking their head. Ladies and gents, Adriano's going to go backstage, freshen up, and then meet you at the bookstore. You're going to be signing some of your books?
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Let's give a round of applause for Adriano Zumbo.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. Yeah.
Ladies and gents, thanks so much. Thanks to our sponsors, Silestone, Kenwood, Handygas, Qantas, International Hotel School. If you'd like to exit, please exit to your left, but come help yourself to a macaroon.